Bob Iger is out there talking about how he is obsessed with finding his replacement and how he cannot wait to retire. I personally don't believe him, but let's talk about the person who just got put in charge of finding Bob Iger's replacement. And an article out of Reuters indicates that he might not be happy who's picking the next CEO of the Walt Disney Company. Let's talk about that on That Park Place. Hello, I am Jonas J. Campbell, an investigative reporter here for That Park Place. And here with me is a guy who also shows up on the channel from time to time. We need to give you an official title. That's really why I stumble so much here, VashSky.
Well, I think a Wookiee co-pilot, I think, is what we're going with right now. But
I'm going to put that on a business card one of these days. Yeah. So an interesting has happened that Bob Iger, you know, the guy that's in charge of the Walt Disney Company, he used to work there and then he worked there again. And now he's extending his contract. He's building those widgets. Bob Iger says that a top Democrat urged him to run for U.S. president because you look the part. Give me a break. Well, what's actually fascinating about this, despite the fact that we all know that Bob Iger, no, he doesn't want to be president. But thank you, everyone, for thinking of me. Going past all of this right here, he said, I think it would be safe to assume that I think about CEO succession all the time. I could say that I'm obsessed with it would probably be an understatement. And actually, the board and I established when I returned that would be among our biggest priorities, if not our biggest priority, Iger said. It's actually something that I'm obviously very focused on, not just because of the past, but because I'd like to retire again and I'd like to leave the company in great hands. And that is my intention. And I'm now confident that not only will we do that, but we'll do so on a timely basis that works for the company and hopefully works for me as well. But yes, it's a huge priority, pointing out up here that his contract runs out at the end of 2026. When they say his contract runs out at the end of 2026, that's when his contract starts and he'll have another 5 years of association with the company, the same one that he was under when he, quote unquote, left the company. You know, the one where he didn't actually leave his office. And Bob Chapek had to stay in his old office, and Bob got the one with the shower, you know, because it's important, that everyone make sure that they not smell Bob Iger here as Bob Chapek tries to run the company. Anyways, I'm pointing out the absurdity of the matter. Hey, Vash, what do you think the odds are that in 2026 Bob Iger leaves this company?
Very low, knowing his history. I mean, look, he put off stepping down, 6 times or something, like just an outrageous number. Every single time it came up, it's like, well, let's go ahead and do it a couple more years and a couple more years and a couple more years. And then when he walked away, he couldn't walk away for long. He was right back in it. So we have to assume that he's going to stick around for a little bit longer here. And even when I said this was a couple of years ago, I said, okay, there's no way if he comes back, he's only going to stay for a finite amount of time. Willow Bay is probably going to get very upset if he doesn't just walk away here. And then he signs another extension. So now that's kind of all out the window. We had to assume that he's going to stay on just for a little bit longer. It's the MO.
Well, they got to get him out of there before he buys another humongous company that they can't afford. Because this is the thing. Every time they extend his contract, he finds something else to buy that makes it even harder for them to find a CEO that could be in charge of all of those things at the exact same time. There's the phrase too big to fail. And now I'm going to say it's the too big to Iger. It could have been a company that you could run when it was just a collection of studios, but now with the purchase of Fox and Hulu and Disney Plus and all of these other things, trying to find someone who has the experience to run something like this, they just make it harder and harder. Maybe they do need to start selling off pieces of this company. I would think ESPN would be an excellent one to spin off, but to each their own.
It's a good point you actually bring up here, Jonas, because I think Susan Arnold has said before, it's like, oh, maybe, you know, this company has gotten so unwieldy. Maybe we need 2 at the top. And I think that may have been just before the Fox purchase there. Now you add on Fox. I mean, it's just this huge juggernaut of a company. Honestly, when it comes to the CEO succession process, which apparently, Iger here is obsessed over, maybe it should be 2 and not just 1.
Well, he's so obsessed with it. He's going on podcasts. He's talking about it. He's admitting to everyone that he shouldn't have made those ABC comments. He actually loves ABC. By the way, he's from ABC. So I think it's actually the only part of the company that he's truly familiar with. I think he's a TV executive when it comes down to it. But I don't want to insult the man too much. I just want to say that maybe he spends a little too much on the idea that he'll be able to pay it back later. Right after all of this happened, and right after his comments on the Kelly Ripa podcast, this statement comes out from the Walt Disney Company. Here, James P. Gorman has been named the head of the succession planning committee here. James P. Gorman is from Morgan Stanley, and he was added to the board along with Sir Jeremy Darish. And I got to say, he's actually someone who has some familiarity with a successful CEO succession process. When he was at Morgan Stanley, there were 3 people that were up for the CEO position. And at the end, one of those people got the CEO position. And the 2 other people who were under consideration stayed on with Morgan Stanley. I would say that that is a successful CEO succession process, if there ever was one. That I think that's kind of mystifying when you talk about a Fortune 500 company. Looking at this right here, there's a clip that I often like to play on the live streams that I'll go ahead and play it right now to let you know how focused on this particular issue I've been.
Well, they're forming a succession committee, which I'll be joining, so I'll be able to...
James Gorman, when he came on, it was supposed to be, I mean, we could say this is halfway through the process now. They said in January of 2023 that they were already working on getting in that next CEO. But at the end of 2023, that's when they brought in James Gorman. And now James Gorman is being named the head of the CEO succession committee. So he's busy. He's got things to do. He's the executive chairman over there at Morgan Stanley as well. So I'm not going to say this is the only thing they're doing, but if you have someone who's obsessed and it's like the only thing they're doing, well, maybe this could have moved a little bit faster. There's also some wrinkles here that we're going to get into in just a moment. Here is the comments from, I'm going to say this is probably Parker saying this. James is a highly respected leader, and we've asked him to serve as the new chair of the Succession Planning Committee, given his deep succession planning experience and long-term strategic mentality, said Parker. There he is, who most recently served as the committee's chair. Succession planning is a top priority of the board, and I am eager to continue collaborating with James on the committee as we advance the important work we have already been doing to identify and prepare the next CEO of the Walt Disney Company. In addition to Gorman and Parker, directors Mary Barra and Calvin McDonald will continue to serve on the committee. Calvin McDonald is from, I want to say, Lululemon, and Mary Barra is in charge of GM. And GM, of course, tied with the parks, sponsoring Test Track in the refurbishment of that one. All members of the committee have direct experience in CEO and senior leadership succession planning for Fortune 500 companies. I look forward to working alongside Mark and my other fellow committee members in advising the board as we continue to press forward expeditiously with this work, Gorman said. They go over some of the history here. It looks like here that they're considering 4 candidates in particular internally, and they're saying that Bob Iger is mentoring those candidates at this point. I don't know what good that is going to do at this point. There has been a long string of people who are the next CEO of the Walt Disney Company. Jay Rasulo comes to mind. Tom Staggs comes to mind. Kevin Mayer. But those aren't any of the names on this list. Well, maybe they are. Jimmy Pitaro from ESPN is on the list. Dana Walden, who's the head of Disney Entertainment, along with Alan Bergman, who is also a head of Disney Entertainment. And who am I missing? Oh, Josh D'Amaro, over there running Tomorrowland for all of Disney parks and experiences. So there isn't a single division in this company that has been functioning exactly the way that it needs to function. Jimmy Pitaro, he was featured in a documentary piece for CNBC where I'm going to say he didn't exactly present himself as Disney CEO material there. Dana Walden is the most likely candidate at this point of the 4 internal candidates. Alan Bergman, doing fine, I suppose, but also not quite standing out from the pack. And that leaves Josh D'Amaro, head of experiences. Bob Iger supposedly doesn't like open campaigning for the CEO position. So I think that that ties the hands of a lot of people who could be in line for that. My personal choice at this point of those who I think are actually under consideration would probably be Kevin Mayer. And there's a little bit of bad news for Bob Iger on James Gorman being named head of the succession committee, but we'll get into that in a moment. Vash, who do you think should be the next CEO of the Walt Disney Company?
Yeah, it would be awesome to get a combination of Kevin Mayer and Tom Staggs. I think that would be very, very appropriate for the Walt Disney Company history, right? We have seen, two heads at the top there do some really great things, and Kevin Mayer and Tom Staggs, I think really understood what Disney was at the time. It was unfortunate that they had been sidelined the way they had. When you talk about the internal candidates like Bergman, for example, or Pitaro, come on, not even in consideration there. Josh Giamaro, Dana Walden. I think there are some aspects or some attributes that he has that could lend itself well to being the CEO of the Walt Disney Company, but I don't think he's really there. Alan Bergman, I think, pretty strong contender, but like you said, hasn't really separated himself out from the pack. And then Dana Walden, oh boy, I mean, that'd be absolutely the worst. And honestly, in my opinion, is the top spot right there. She came in from the Fox acquisition, and wouldn't it be great for Bob Iger to ride off into the sunset going, well, not only did I break the glass ceiling, but I made one of the biggest acquisitions in history in the Fox purchase. We had a great run in 2024 when it came to Fox deliverables there, and now we get to cap it off with a CEO successor that I inherited. I think that would be Bob Iger's happily ever after there that he's looking for, and that's most unfortunate for the company.
I totally agree. And the other thing here is actually James Gorman, I think, would make a better CEO at this point. Why? Because does he have any media experience? No, but he is a guy who has run a large investment bank and therefore has experience in running a large business, and then can delegate everything else to probably look at competency. So it does give me some hope here that Gorman is in charge of this process. I don't really know with Mark Parker. There is something going on with the Walt Disney Company that I think is fascinating here. Comcast is the holder of the last 30% of Hulu, and this has been a contentious process for Disney because Disney agreed to buy the last third of Hulu at a valuation of $27.5 billion. That means that last third would be around $9 billion. Throughout this process, there's been some contention on how much Hulu is actually worth, and it's come out that maybe Disney's going to have to pay an additional $5 billion on top of the $8.61 billion that they have already paid. And one of the valuations was provided by Morgan Stanley. So when we look at this article out of Reuters that was provided to me by my good friend Culture Casino right here, exclusive Disney and Comcast seek advisor to resolve Hulu valuation. This from May of this year. The move is in accordance with a deal the company struck for Hulu last year. It's an action their contract foresees if JP Morgan Chase, which provided a fairness opinion on Hulu for Disney, and Morgan Stanley, which provided such an opinion for Comcast. According to articles out of Variety that from Todd Spangler, it says that Disney's option, which was JP Morgan Chase, valued Hulu at less than $27.5 billion, which is a ridiculous statement, to say the least. Hulu is a fully functioning streaming service. So if Disney wants the keys to that one, I don't think $5 billion additional on top of the $8.61 billion is too much to pay for it. But apparently it's Morgan Stanley that raised that value. Gives me more hope that Morgan Stanley and the guy who used to run it runs an honest ship over there. I don't know. I would imagine that Bob Iger probably pretty frustrated with Morgan Stanley and their executive there, J.P. Gorman. I love the fact that it's J.P. Gorman running Morgan Stanley in competition with J.P. Morgan. I'll try not to get too tripped up on that. What I do want to do is throw this to our commenters. If we haven't gotten too into the weeds here, talking about all the corporate intrigue going on, who do you think would be the best CEO candidate for running the Walt Disney Company? Just any option. Just really go wild with it. Tell me it's James Hong from Big Trouble in Little China. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Like this video if you like this video, and consider subscribing to That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Place News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.